Sikkim 365 and Baylor Plus have teamed up to bring Baylor fans the ultimate content bundle. You can sign up now for $17.99 a month, a $5 monthly savings, and get instant access to all premium content on both websites. For more information, visit either Sikkim365.com or BaylorPlus.com today. What's up, Baylor family? Welcome into Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. It's Friday, October 25th, and in just a little bit, Grace and I will be giving you our keys to the game for Baylor's defense in their homecoming matchup against Oklahoma State on Saturday. But first, here is Grace's interview with Baylor offensive lineman Sidney Fugar.
What's going on, Baylor fans? I'm here today with Baylor redshirt junior offensive lineman Sidney Fugar. How's it going, Sidney? How's it been?
Everything's going good so far. How you doing, Grayson?
I'm doing great. It's been an exciting time. You know, y'all just got to go on the road to Lubbock and put together your most complete performance of the season. How did that feel for y'all?
To be honest, it felt great. I mean, we've been on this losing streak, trying to find a way to win, and we finally just basically just rolled our sleeves up and just got dirty and went to work.
You know, specifically the offensive line, just really, it felt like y'all put it all together this week, especially in the run game. Was there a huge focus on that during the bye week?
I wouldn't say that. I'd say this has probably been an ongoing thing from the start of the season. I mean, we've always kind of harped and wanted to, run the ball, but we haven't ran efficiently. So it was kind of cool to kind of see that, okay, that we can do this and we can be efficient and, you know what I'm saying, we can run the ball down anybody's throat. So that's what I liked, what we did on Saturday.
Yeah, I know y'all added a little bit from a scheme perspective in the run game, running a little bit more off tackle type stuff. Do you think that helped y'all out a little bit?
For sure. I feel like it definitely gave us more options to kind of confuse the defense if we're going to stretch it, if we're going to run it down the middle. So, I mean, I love the little plays that we got so far because it shows what I could do for the offense as well when we're running those kind of wide zones.
I know you mentioned earlier, you kind of said, you know, this is kind of what y'all expected, or that this is kind of the performance y'all were thinking was going to happen.
Yes.
You just needed to get there. Do you feel like there's momentum on the offensive side now?
Yes, because one thing that Coach Spav has definitely harped on us is we got to take control of the game somehow, some way. So it showed on Saturday that we can start off good and we can also finish good. So as long as we keep that up, I mean, I have no worries for this offense.
So what's the next step for y'all to become an even better offense or maybe reach that next level? What do you think y'all need to do?
I feel like we as an offense, we shouldn't be complacent because yes, we did something good last week, but that doesn't relate till next week. You know what I'm saying? So what are we going to do as an offense to prepare for to replicate what we did last week and bring it to next week? So that comes down to, I mean, getting all your stuff done with school and obviously watching film and getting all the extra stuff in with I don't know, whatever you got to do with your body, like everything that's going to basically trickle down for us to have a successful game on Saturday. So for us, I feel like the thing that is the thing that we got to do is be consistent. I mean, we've shown that we can be explosive. We've shown that we can run the ball. We've shown that we can pass protect. So I just feel like the only thing next is consistency.
Right. So I did want to ask you, Sidney, you've played a lot of positions during your college career. You've kind of been all over the place. I know you played some left guard when you got to Baylor as well. How's it been kind of locking in at this left tackle position and just trying to kind of run with this spot and help the team?
For me, I feel like this transition from guard to tackle has been pretty easy. because for me, I mean, obviously, if you look back at my history, I mean, I've been playing straight tackle reps, so it wasn't going to be hard for me to translate over back. But I feel like playing guard at the beginning of the season helped me kind of get comfortable in the offense, understand what me and my guy are doing on the field at all times. So when I got put to tackle, it wasn't like, oh, like I was scared or anything. It was just more so like, okay, like I understand what all five guys are doing now. And so it made me more comfortable in the offense. So my transition to tackle just seemed smooth. So I'm just glad that Coach Miller put me at guard at first so I can understand the offense even better and basically be great at tackle.
Do you feel like tackle is the position? I know you've played it a lot in your career, but you have played some guard. Is tackle where you feel most comfortable though?
Yes. I feel like I'm just a better tackle than a guard. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously I just have more experience, but I mean, I don't mind playing anything because at the end of the day, I just want to be versatile and I just want to be great at whatever I can be great at and also help the team. So I feel like um I feel like in a sense I am a better tackle, but at the end of the day, I mean, whatever I can do to make the team better and also show my versatility, I will do.
So there's obviously a lot of offense linemen in this room, some older guys, some younger guys. Who are some of those young guys that maybe you've seen take a big step forward, who maybe they're not going to play a ton this year, but you're seeing them continue to put the work in and improve?
I feel like Colin Thomason, Sean, and Colin Saraki.
Hmm.
Those three are the most like surprising, not surprising, but like they shock me every day in a good way. And what I mean by that is like every day they just take these steps that I'm just like, whoa, I never thought you would do that. Like a couple months ago you couldn't do this and now you're doing it. Like I'm like, whoa, like you're getting better. And it just makes me excited because I can see that those three are gonna be like one day gonna be the, you know what I'm saying, the offensive lineman of this place. And I want them to see how important it is to be an offensive lineman and also take that ownership that, you know what I'm saying, that this is us, this is our identity, we are the union. We have to kind of they have to kind of show that, well, not what they kind of show, but they're showing what they could be next year or in the next couple years or whatever years they have left. But those are the most promising to me, that they just keep getting better and they just keep getting physical and they just keep getting smarter and the game just starts to continue to get slower for them. And I just love that for them.
Sidney, when you're talking, you kind of feel like a guy that's a little bit of a leader of the room. And I mean, is that something that you pride yourself on? I mean, this is your first year technically as an upperclassman.
Yes. I wouldn't say I'm the leader of the group only because I don't really want to come in and be like, oh yeah, I'm the guy or whatnot. Like I just want to be someone that can help the team, someone that can just be a positive influence on anybody that needs my help, honestly. And so, I mean, in a way, I do kind of give that leadership vibe, but honestly, our leaders are Colin Price and Amarion Abidion because, I mean, every single day, I mean, they come in and I mean, they're very smart, they're very savvy, but they also bring that little edge to the offensive line room. Like I bring the aggressiveness, but like they bring that like okay, like let's all get together and let's go hit them in the mouth. And I just and it just gets me going every time when they talk. But I mean, yeah, I just that's how I feel about my place as the offensive line as the offensive line leaders, not per se me, but yeah.
So I know you're a guy who transferred in this offseason, so you probably have a
Yes.
little bit of a different perspective. But I guess the first question from that part of it is what made you choose Baylor?
So originally, I mean, I transferred because obviously I wanted to play. I felt like I had a chance to get to the league. And I mean, I just felt like throughout my options, because I mean, I had a whole bunch of options. I mean, I had a couple of Big 12 schools that I could have went to, but I mean, when I got to Baylor, it was more so like, okay, they treated me like family. They're showing me how I can be an impact on this team, and then they're showing me like all the different opportunities that I can have here. And so when I first got the wake on me, it was kind of a feeling like I was already home and I was already comfortable with everything. And me and Coach Miller were talking, and I can understand the playbook and stuff like that. So it just felt right to come in here, you know. Like I don't know what it is. I think it's the culture here, or I don't know what we got in the water to wake up, but I love it, man. I'll keep drinking the water here.
And now that you're here, do you just feel like this was the best decision you could have possibly made?
Honestly, yes. Even though we are 3-4, and whatever the case is, I mean, I don't think I'll take it. I don't think I'll take it back. I love Coach Aranda. I love the whole coaching staff, and they love me back. So it's like why wouldn't I go hard for those guys? Why wouldn't I make sure that I'm fine for the guy next to me, you know? And that's yeah, yeah.
That's
Love
great,
it.
man. Well, Sidney, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you and good luck this weekend.
No, I appreciate you. All right, Grayson.
See ya.
Yep.
So great interview, Grayson, there with Sidney Fugar. Obviously, the offensive line continues to look like it's gelling within the scheme. No sacks the last 2 games. No tackles for loss against Texas Tech. Sidney starting at left tackle. Kind of, it looks like he might be the guy there for the rest of the season. But, you know, it's key in this particular game for the offense. We discussed those keys in our last episode for the offense after in talking with Jake Spavital as well. But now we're going to move into our defensive keys of the game for Baylor against Oklahoma State. And, you know, Grayson, like usually you go into these games against Oklahoma State with Mike Gundy and you're just like, what's he going to do? How is this game going to go? Well, this year has been, I think, a little bit of that, but more of like, can they get any production from that? Can they get consistency and production from their quarterback position? Because if not, what is Ollie Gordon going to be able to do? Old veteran, you know, established offensive line is still not very good if you're not able to throw the football to open things up for Ollie Gordon. Because right now teams are just completely stacking the box against him. And truthfully, until that BYU game, which surprised me a little bit, that they were able to run the ball in BYU, but they haven't been able to do it consistently this year. And I think for a road game against Baylor, I just have a feeling they're going to try more and more things to get Ollie Gordon going in this game and try to get control of this game early.
I can definitely see that. I think that's probably going to be one of the areas that we talk about. I mean, it's basically the blueprint from last week, right? Where it's like, hey, you know, if we go into this game and we don't let Ollie Gordon beat us, and we force Alan Bowman to go win this game, you got to feel pretty good about your game plan. And that's what they did with Baron Morton last week. They didn't shut Taj Brooks out, but they held him in check for the vast majority of that game. Like if you watch that game, it was very clear he was not going to win that game for Texas Tech. And that's kind of what you want to see from Baylor this upcoming week. You got to force Alan Bowman to beat you. This is a guy who was just benched last week. And the only reason he is starting this game is because the guy who started over him got injured. And so now you're like, where's his confidence going to be at? He hasn't had a good year. Oklahoma State fans have been talking about him nonstop about how bad he's been this season. He hasn't completed over 50% of his passes versus any Power 4 competition this season. You match that inaccuracy with the 9 interceptions that he has this year, and you're looking at a quarterback that is really, really struggling and a quarterback that Baylor needs to force to beat them. And in order to do that, they got to stop Ollie Gordon. Yeah. At least the best they can, right?
Yeah, no, it is. And Allen is interesting, man, because like you look at what he did last year in leading into a Big 12 championship game. He was pretty good, protected the ball pretty well, ran that offense well. They want to get the ball out of his hands quick. But now it's just like Ollie Gordon was so good. That was obviously retrospectively the reason that they did what they did. Nation's leading rusher, like you're talking about potential, you know, he's still going to be a first round pick in my mind. They just struggled so much getting him ability to run. And in Mike Gundy's weekly presser, it was interesting. Someone asked him about what Ollie was capable of doing. He's like, well, I can tell you this much. And this is kind of Mike Gundy's summarizing what he said. It was like, he's getting everything that is available to get. And I thought that was really interesting. He's basically saying our offensive line's not giving him enough to do, and our offense can't give him. He's out there maximizing everything. And so that means to me, he's playing hard and he's running hard. Baylor has to do that. And I don't know if that was kind of your first to the key of the game, but it's just like, if you're going to make Alan Bowman, but it starts with saying, hey, we're going to play the box. And we're gonna have guys stacked in there, and then you're gonna have to win one-on-one battles because you haven't shown the ability to move the ball without turning it over, especially with Alan Bowman. And truthfully, no one has been able to, or you have not been able to run on anyone outside of BYU, and that's when you implemented a lot of QB run in that game. So you mentioned the game, Taj Brooks. He had 125 yards, I believe it was. 45 of those yards came on one drive. 31 came on one play. Outside of that drive to open the second half, Baylor completely limited him. I don't know how Oklahoma State's offensive line compares to Texas Tech in the grand schemes. I think Oklahoma State's better, but they haven't necessarily shown that ability to be better because of how defenses are playing them.
Right. And I think it more so has something to do with the offensive line just hasn't been great at run blocking. They've been pretty good in pass blocking, which is also that's a pretty wild thing to say when Alan Bowman is performing like he is. But truthfully, I mean, we can go back and forth on Alan Bowman, and we probably will here in a second, but he's just the same guy he was last year. I mean, he had 15 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. Average yard per attempt was still below 7.5. Like, these numbers haven't really changed. It's just they're not running the ball at this absurdly high level that they were running it at last year, because I think people are just basically saying exactly what you're saying, Colt, which is if we stop Ollie Gordon, you force Alan Bowman to beat you, is he going to be able to do that? And the answer so far has been no. And I think that's why they went to Garrett Rangel, because at least with Rangel, he gave you an opportunity to run the football better, because he's a better athlete and he can move. And now with Alan Bowman, you have a statue in the pocket. And so it's like when that ball's handed off, it is absolutely going to the running back. He's not keeping it. And that's a big thing. And that's a luxury. And I mean, as people who cover Baylor, we've seen kind of, what that can lead to when your offensive line isn't dominating and you don't have a mobile quarterback. And it can lead to a lot of problems.
Yeah. And if you watch the BYU game, once Rangel went out and Bowman was in, they still ran some of those option, there's some RPOs. They run a lot of RPOs, but it was like the true option plays where, he's faking it or, reading the defensive end and pulling around. They actually ran that with Bowman, but the difference between him and Rangel was so much difference. And if you look at Ollie Gordon's stats, he carried 16 times for 107 yards. 50 yards of that came on one run. So you're talking 15 carries for another 57 yards throughout the game. And I don't know what
basically who he's been this year. That's basically what it's been.
Yeah. And I don't know what his difference between when Allen was in there versus Garrett. But I'm sure it was pretty significant. And you look at Rangel's number, the play that he got hurt on was a 54-yard run.
Yep.
He had 77 yards rushing, 54 of that came on one carry. So while they did rush for more yards against BYU, it was kind of a 13 days of game plan situation versus 5 for BYU. I think that's what it might have come down to. And I'm not discrediting Oklahoma State at all, but you just kind of look into these games and you understand what really happened. BYU they just look completely, if you watch any of their games this year, they just looked like they really were off. They did not look like the same team that played in a lot of their games. I mean, they had four turnovers after leading in turnover margin, basically the entire season. But with all that said, it's more about Oklahoma State. That's the game that you point to and say they have some life offensively. Well, then they lose their quarterback that kind of helped them get there. So go back to that original point. They got to stop Ollie Gordon. Defensively, and I think Dave Aranda will kind of game plan for that, and then trust your defense to get turnovers in the secondary or make plays in the secondary, and you have a pretty good chance to win.
Right. And I mean, the reason why I say that's who Ollie Gordon has been all year, I mean, it's pretty evident. I don't even know that I realized that it was this bad. But I mean, if you look at what he's done this year, he had 126 against South Dakota State, and then he had 107 against BYU. Outside of that, He's got 4 games where he has 50 yards rushing or less, and then he has one 76-yard game.
Yeah.
I mean, it is shockingly bad how he has been. And really, because of how he's performed all year, the expectation really should be that Baylor holds him under 100 yards rushing, maybe even under 75 yards rushing. They should be able to completely take him out of the game based on how Oklahoma State has performed throughout the entire season. And we have a pretty big sample size now. And we have a sample size of them playing against some pretty mediocre defenses like West Virginia and Arkansas. Utah, K-State, and BYU, those are tougher, but those other two, not so much. And he didn't play particularly well in those games. So I agree with you. Shut down the run, because then you force Alan Bowman to beat you. And that's kind of exactly where you want to be. Yeah.
And playing off that to my second key for the defense is kind of like what they did against Tech. When Baron Morton started having to throw the football, he's throwing into tight windows. And we saw Caden Jenkins' interception that basically shut that game down. Like that game at that point was still a game. Baylor had just scored, but they take it back away from him immediately because of the coverage that they're playing. If they're not able to run the ball, they're going to have to throw the ball with Alan Bowman. Your defensive backs, safeties have to make plays. And you want to say, creating fumbles, doing that type of number, like fumbles are just so difficult because there's so many things that have to go right. Like once the ball's on the ground, you still got to recover. Interceptions, if you can create confusion for Alan Bowman, which he's shown that not necessarily confusion. There's some, I think in one of his games, turnover worthy plays by PFF was lower than interception totals, which was interesting because that means that somebody tipped it wasn't a turnover worthy play. It was just a tip ball interception, but they're giving it up. And you want to be able to be in positions to make plays and not let him attack vertically. They're going to want to attack vertically some, but it really comes down to if they're not running the football, they're going to have a hard time trying to throw it vertical as well.
Right. And during this 4-game losing streak, he has 7 interceptions. I mean, he is throwing it to the other team a ton. It has been really ugly to watch, to be honest with you. And this is what we're talking about. They get behind in these games, which they have. They've gotten behind in a few of them. And now you're forcing him to have to throw the ball deep downfield, forcing him to throw the ball on, 2nd and 10, every single time because you can't run the ball to run out the clock. You need more time. And so that puts him in terrible situations. And that's why starting fast for Baylor is going to be pretty key, because you want to put Oklahoma in a game, or Oklahoma State in a game script where they're having to throw the ball a ton. You take away the run. Now you force them to be one-dimensional. And now you're going to put Alan Bowman in very uncomfortable situations, because this is not a guy who wants to throw the ball 15 yards downfield in situations where the defense knows he's trying to throw it 15 yards down the field. He much more so wants to do, 2nd and 3, then take a shot deep. That's more his style. And if you get him out of that style, you can have a lot of success. And these, past 4 defenses have really had a ton of success against Alan Bowman.
Yeah, if you look at what Baylor did against Colorado, the style of defense they played in that game, the style of defense they played against Texas Tech, this is another very similar. There will be some tweaks in it, but I imagine this will be a very similar style of defense for Dave Aranda. They're going to get the ball out of Alan Bowman's hands quick, so you can't say, we got to rush the passer. Like those sacks come more from you have really good coverage in the situations where they're trying to throw the football and he doesn't have anywhere to go to the ball. I can imagine they come into this game and saying, hey, don't turn the football over. If we're going to win, you got to be careful with the ball. Well, that means that he's going to sit back there and probably take a little bit more time, or he's getting the ball out of his hand really quick. If he's taking time, that's when you're going to get your sacks. And so I don't necessarily think it's a key, but it's something to watch if he's trying to avoid the turnover. I think that for Baylor's defense, that being able to just say, hey, go and read the defense and throw into coverage is their best route for this particular game. In terms of what you're doing in the secondary, play pass or rush defense first, but then if you're just keeping contained on Alan Bowman, he's not a threat to run, but then make him throw into tight windows whenever he has to throw.
Right. And he hasn't been one that's stood in the pocket and then let people up. And so it does feel like that would be the route that Baylor should take or will take, especially if they can take away the run game. That makes a lot of sense. So for me, my next key to the game is actually kind of in line with what we just talked about. But, games can be flipped on a couple plays here or there, and offensive production can be flipped on a couple plays here or there. And Oklahoma State has really good wide receivers. and they have guys who can flat out go make plays. And so if you allow Alan Bowman time, and let's just say, you lose matchups on the outside and you give up explosive plays time and time again, you might find yourself in a world of hurt. And Oklahoma State, again, they have the guys. Brennan Presley, very tough guy to guard. Dejon Stribling has actually been their best receiver this year. Rashad Owens is a guy who's been at Oklahoma State for a long time. And then Talon Chetron, their, 5-star type prospect, another really good player. And so they have weapons. And so if you allow these guys to hit on, 3, 4, 5 explosive plays, it might completely turn the game. And so that's an area that Baylor does have to limit. I agree with you. If they can force it to be more, Alan Bowman hitting guys in windows and getting 8-yard gains, that's much better than, it's 2nd and 3 and you're having to try to stop the run and then they're running play action and they're hitting a deep shot. That's what Baylor can't allow to happen in this game. They got to figure out a way to limit those. They've gotten burnt by it a couple times this year, but for the most part, I think they've been pretty good at eliminating those, and they're going to have to do it once again on Saturday.
Yeah, they do. And you talk about getting pressure. Oklahoma State's number 1 in sacks allowed. Yeah. 0.08 per game. Tackles for loss, even though Ollie Gordon isn't running the ball really well, they don't give up a lot of tackles for loss. They're kind of at the line. And that's probably a testament to Ollie Gordon of just, hey, I'm going to get what's there. What Mike Gundy said, like, he's maximizing what we are giving him. We're just not maximizing it for him. And if you're able to avoid, and it does go really back to that first, like, stop the run. If you stop the run, the windows are going to be much smaller in the secondary. So I think it all kind of plays hand in hand. Where I'm looking defensively, they're not giving up explosive play. I mean, they're not creating explosive plays already, and they're not giving up sacks. That means, and you might have the numbers in front of you for Alan Bowman's PFF time to throw. Like, I imagine that's around like 2.1 for the season. It might jump up there a little bit higher at times, but it's pretty quick reads. And I don't think that's anything new. I think that is the Mike Gundy offense. Let's get the ball out quick. Some of those really quick screen throws are available there. And it comes down to, and this is my key, just playing defense, playing disciplined defense and not allowing guys to get by you. We saw that in the Colorado game. We've seen these pass interferences this year that absolutely drive me nuts of guys chasing down the field. If you're a safety, don't let them get deeper than you. And one of the things that Baylor did against Tech, Corey Gordon at safety actually played a career high in snaps in terms of, at least this year, and especially at deep safety, played 68 snaps in that game. Maybe they implement that 3 safety look again, where they're playing a lot of safeties and nobody's getting deep. And then you're really forcing Alan Bowman to throw into tight windows. You're not letting him run the ball, but you're playing 3 guys pretty deep in the quarters. Just whatever they did against Colorado, whatever they did against Texas Tech is the best route for me in this particular game. And then in general, man, like, if you look at their offense in the same way you look at their defense, they don't do anything exceptionally well except prevent negative plays. And I think that's what Mike Gundy's having to do. And I don't know if there's any other key than just saying, just don't get beat. Don't make stupid plays. Don't, we look at the BYU game specifically early. You just had lapses. You had mental lapses where guys are getting beat deep. You have stuff where you're not tackling well. Go into this game and make those plays. Make those plays early and take Oklahoma State out, take their confidence away immediately.
Right. And I think for this season, it's also really important that Baylor forces turnovers in this game. I think, you come home, again, you're in a home environment. You got to be ready to go. You got to be ready to make plays. We saw in the Texas Tech game, they're able to force a couple of those. And I think in this game, that's really important because as the season progresses, you would like to see Baylor turning a corner in that regard. They haven't been great at forcing turnovers so far this year and, had a couple against Tech, but we'll see if that's starting to change. Because again, I think Alan Bowman is going to give them opportunities for that to happen. I also think if you can put your offense in really good positions to score, you're probably going to get a touchdown or you're probably going to get points on the board when you give them those opportunities in this matchup, which makes it extremely important for them to be able to go out there and do it. And, you mentioned having more safeties out there. DJ Coleman should be back this week. Tevin Williams should be back this week. Those are two nice pieces to their secondary, guys who are depth options, but also, Tevin has started at times as well. And so you kind of put that together and you got a much deeper group back there that is more prepared for this matchup, because in that last game, Corey Gordon, Carl Williams, Devin Lemire, and Devin Bobby played a ton of snaps, all four of them. So I'm curious if how that trend continues with DJ back and just how they look overall, being the healthiest that they've been all year.
Yeah, we talked about the turnovers in Baylor, not necessarily struggling, because I think they do a decent job of forcing turnovers out of the numbers. Let me see if I can pull these up really quick. Total gain, Baylor's against FBS Power 5 opponents, they're number 11, so not great in the Big 12. But if you look at the teams they've played, Iowa State, Colorado, BYU, they're all Texas Tech before that game were all pretty good about protecting the football. The teams that they're about to face do not protect the football. Oklahoma State, West Virginia, Houston, TCU are all in the bottom third of the league in terms of it. So if there's going to be opportunities soon, now they've got to go do it. I think you're right. I think it's in this particular game, Oklahoma State's going to present opportunities to take the ball away, specifically throwing interceptions. They don't fumble it a ton, but 9 interceptions on the season from their quarterbacks. And so with all that, we've done offensive picks. Now we've done offensive keys of the game, defensive keys of the game. Let's move into our game picks. And this one, I think last week you picked the game right, straight up, in terms of picking Baylor to win. You're one of 2 people on the Sikkim 365 staff to do it. I did not. Jack McKenzie was the other one. But this is a game, Baylor's favored by 7. I don't know how far we have to go back to where Baylor is favored in a Big 12 game by 7 points. I think it's pretty far. It's at least through this season, at least through last season, where they're favored by that much, and maybe favored outright at all. I think they're favored against BYU, and that line dipped down to like 3, 2.5 or so. Mm-hmm. But where is your head at for this game going into predictions? You don't have to give it right off the top. I'm just more curious about the overall outlook for you in this game.
So I kind of told you I have a little bit of an uneasy feeling about this game, and we've talked about that a little bit. It's just tough. Baylor has not performed well at home against conference teams. They've lost their last 8 at home against conference opponents, 3-10 in their last 13 overall. It has not been good. And so now you're just kind of going, okay, this team is just a lot better than those teams. They're a lot more prepared for this kind of matchup, even though they're playing a very mediocre team. And so I think that's kind of where my initial read is. I will say this, though. I think Baylor should have success on offense. I think things set up very well for their defense to be able to make plays and get off the field and create turnovers and get stops. And so all signs for me point to Baylor winning this game, outside of the one little stat that just speaks towards trends. And so that's kind of where I'm sitting at the moment. It's also nice to see the Vegas odds going from 3.5 point favorite to 7 point favorite. It just continues to grow. So a lot of money on Baylor for sure.
Yeah, it is. And I think that speaks, after I really dove into this game, like there were some concerns before the Tech game, before last weekend's, of what Oklahoma State was. And you knew that Mike Gundy would at some point give a kickstart to his team. I think and believe that kickstart was last week against BYU, and then they lost. And so that's where I think that flip of, you started a new quarterback, you had 2 weeks to prepare for that game against BYU when they're coming off a short week. There were so many favorable things for Oklahoma State in that game. You go on the road to Provo, you have a lead in the closing minutes of that game, and then you lose. Like that is mentally, that can, I don't want to say destroy a team, because if you have a good culture, but there's a lot that goes into that. Now you go back to the quarterback that you thought wasn't good enough. Now you're kind of like, what do we do offensively now? We were turning the ball over. And then for Baylor, it's complete opposite. So many ways. I mentioned this earlier this week. So many reasons that this game is like the Colorado Baylor game, and then the BYU Kansas State game coming to Waco, BYU coming to Waco. 2 opposite ends of the spectrum. How do these teams respond? I'm banking on Baylor responding in a very positive way, much like BYU did after their big win over Kansas State. Not a top 25 win, but a big win over Texas Tech. So I feel good about Baylor. I feel like this is the week at home that they put it all together, but I still worry about Mike Gundy and what he's going to be able to do for this particular team, because you know that they're going to come out and play hard.
They absolutely will. You're right about all the BYU talk about that week. There were so many favorable things for Oklahoma State. And in many ways, I think that BYU game was very much like the Tech game for Baylor, where it's like it's pretty much a must win if you want your season to kind of turn around. At least that's the way I viewed it for Baylor. That's kind of the way I viewed it for Oklahoma State as well, with the remaining schedule they have left. So yeah, I guess diving into my pick, I am going to take Baylor. I think that there are probably a couple ways that you could go about this. I think it's pretty much picking Baylor to win rather comfortably, not blow them out, but a rather comfortable win by like 2 scores. Or you're probably going to pick Oklahoma State to win a close game. That's kind of how I view this. But I think Baylor's probably going to win this game by like 11 points. I think the score that's been in my head this week is 38-27. Baylor wins this game. I think they cover the touchdown spread as well. And I think just in general, Baylor feeds off the momentum they gained from that Texas Tech game. This group learning how to win, because this is a group that has not won a lot of games, a lot of meaningful games at least. And so now you get an opportunity to do that. You get an opportunity to come back home in front of your home fans who are just starving for a home win, starving for a great performance at home in your building against a Big 12 team. And you're facing Mike Gundy and an Oklahoma State program that you routinely compete against on the recruiting trail. This game has all of the parts to it for Baylor to come out and have a good enough performance to win the game. Might require a little bit of jitters early, might require some moments where we're all kind of hesitating. But I think in general, I think Baylor is going to find a way to win this game and win it rather comfortably.
Yeah. So when I go into picking these scores, I look specifically at their last 3 games, and you look at the BYU game, West Virginia, Kansas State, and really back to the Utah game. I think the Utah game is kind of an anomaly now because of what Utah is and what we figured out's going on there, even dating back to when Baylor played them. But outside of the BYU game, Oklahoma State scored 14, 20, and 19. The common theme in all of those, they did play better defenses, but it was Alan Bowman was the starting quarterback. I don't know, I think Baylor's still a pretty good defense. The metrics might not show it, but they've given up some garbage time, some scores, the overtime stuff against Colorado. I think they're better than what they are, what they show. And I think that for this particular game, if Oklahoma State comes out and scores, say, more than 24 points, I would be pretty disappointed considering what we know about Oklahoma State and the potential of Baylor's defense. Defensively, Oklahoma State just gives up more than what typical teams are scoring in other games. I mean, across the board, if you look at the Kansas State game, Kansas State scored 13 more points against Oklahoma State than they average in other Power 5 games. West Virginia, 22 points more than what they average in other Power 5 games. And then even BYU, they scored 5 more points, but that whole game was kind of wonky in general. So Baylor's going to and should score more points than they have the rest of the season, and they're averaging 30 points. So it's kind of this if that trend continues, Baylor's going to score more, which puts me really close in line to what I think what your score was. I think it's going to be similar. I'm thinking like a 35-24-ish game. Mm-hmm. And I think that would be below the point total. I think Baylor's defense is getting a little bit discredited for some issues early. Colorado game, and then the Tech game giving up 14 points. I think that takes away from it when those games were not in control, but Baylor's defense played pretty well in those games. So I'm looking at 35-24 for this particular game. Baylor winning, but that was with the understanding that Baylor comes out and plays focused football. I just don't think Oklahoma State's that good right now.
Right, and we're both actually on the under because the over-under is a whopping 65.5. I would probably take the under on that, even though my score gets you to 65 right on the dot. So, I think we're pretty much in the same spot. So, 2-score win for Baylor, 11 points for both of us. Somewhere
there's some wiggle room there. I think that's the wiggle room is kind of that's kind of where I am. It's if it ends up being a 7-point win, a 7-point line for this game is big. There's not many Big 12 games that are 7-point lines this year. And for Baylor to have that currently, it might drop some by the time the game kicks off, but 7 points is pretty large. So if this ends up being a 7-point win, you feel pretty good. I think Baylor's better than that if both teams play to what they have this year.
Right. If they continue the trends that they've had this particular season, Baylor should win this game. But again, there are other factors to this, and Baylor's going to have to come out there and play well and put together 2 straight good performances, which has been tough, put together a complete game at home in conference play, which has been tough. There's just a lot of those factors, and Baylor really needs to start, just kind of taking care of the checklist, right? Take care of these home losses in conference play. Next week, take care of the problems that they've had against their biggest rival in TCU. The next week, go to Morgantown and win a game that they've never won on the road in Morgantown. There's a little bit of a checklist these next 3 weeks that should provide ample motivation to have good efforts.
Yeah, everything that they did against Texas Tech can be undone very quickly beginning Saturday, or it can be confirmed and Baylor could be in a really good spot to finish the season. I'm anxious to see what happens. And I think for Baylor fans, show up and see what happens. Give this team your support, because if you do that and they win, you're going to enjoy it. And it's going to be a lot of fun to lead you into the TCU game, not to look too far ahead. So any final thoughts on this game as we move into the weekend?
Fans, just be ready to bring it. This is a game where the players really, I think, need the fans in this game. I know that this requires them starting well. You start off like you did in the BYU game, it can take fans out of it, but fans just need to be ready for this game, because if this team gets back to 4-4, that's a great start to the season, to be honest. And that's about what people expected coming into the year as well. And then there's opportunities for more going forward. And maybe this team overachieves, honestly. Yeah. And so we'll see how it plays out. But I do think this is a great opportunity for the fans to really get behind this team after that dominant win in Lubbock. Come back home, try to put together 2 straight good performances. And hopefully that just provides more momentum for this football program.
Yeah. All right, Baylor family, that's going to do it for this episode of Inside Baylor Sports. As always, thanks to each of you for listening. Thanks for this week for Coach Spavital and Sidney Fugar for visiting with us. For Grayson Grudenhafer, I'm Colt Barber. Have a great Friday and a game weekend, and Sick 'em Bears.